This Warmaster battle report features the ally system. Each side is composed of 2 allied armies, each of 1,000 points, with their own separate breakpoints. Continuing our theme from an earlier battle, the vengeful Tomb Kings have pursued their Bretonnian enemies back to Bretonnia. The Tomb King has called upon a vassal state of Arabians to accompany him, whilst the Bretonnians have allied with the Dwarfs of the Grey Mountains to repel the invaders. The battlefield represents the farmlands of Bretonnia and features 3 hills. There are also 3 woods. Only infantry can enter woods and gain defended status within it. 2 marshes. Marshes function very similar to woods, except they do not block line of sight. 4 farms, which we play as built-up areas. 3 fields, which follow the rules for broken ground. And 7 obstacles, which provide defended status for infantry behind them and cannot be crossed by chariots. So let us review the Bretonnian roster. The Bretonnians must take a general, 1 unit of knights and 1 unit of squires, and 1 unit of men-at-arms. They add 3 more units of knights, 1 unit of Grail Knights and 1 unit of Pegasus Knights, a unit of bowmen and a damsel. Only the knights count towards the breakpoint, so this army has a breakpoint of 3. Next we shall see what the Dwarfs bring to the field. The Dwarfs must take 1 general and 2 units of warriors. They add a further 4 units of warriors and 2 units of slayers. The dwarf breakpoint is 4. Characters can issue orders to their allies at a -1 command penalty, but are otherwise free to interact with each other. Now let us look at the Araby army. They have to take 1 general, 2 units of spearmen and 2 units of bowmen. They add 2 units of knights, a unit of camel riders, a unit of elephants and a unit of magic carpets. Finally they add 1 wizard and a unit to represent his mirage spell. The Araby breakpoint is 5. Finally, we look at the Tomb King's army. We must have 1 Tomb King general. We must also take 2 units of warriors and 2 units of archers. We add 4 more units of warriors, 2 units of chariots and 2 units of cavalry, a unit of carrion, and a lich priest mounted on a zombie dragon. The Undead breakpoint is 7. Carrion are deployed behind the safety of a hill. The zombie dragon deploys centrally, whilst the magic carpets take the left flank. The Bretonnian general masses 2 units of knights, the squires and his infantry on his right flank. The dwarf general deploys his heavy infantry in the centre, with Pegasus Knights behind, while the Bretonnian damsel, 2 units of knights and the Grail Knights take the Bretonnian left. The Tomb King places most of his strength on his right flank. He commands the cavalry and chariot brigade with 1 infantry brigade in support. Araby camel riders also deploy here. The Lich Priest on Zombie Dragon commands the final infantry brigade in the Undead centre. The Araby general deploys his troops centre to left among the defensible terrain. Infantry brigades protect the elephant's flanks, with the knights and the wizard deploying on the Araby left. The generals survey their armies and the opponents awaiting them on the battlefield. Both armies have gone for an infantry centre and cavalry wings deployment, although the Undead have heavily loaded their right flank. Dwarf and Bretonnian infantry push forwards in the centre to form a strong battle line. Bretonnian knights crest the hill on their left, and more Bretonnian cavalry navigate the woods to their right. Magic carpets home back towards the Araby wizard. Undead infantry take up defensive positions in the woods. The magic carpets are then ordered to fly behind the Pegasus Knights and harass them, while the undead right flank begins its slow advance. The Araby forces decide to hold their defensive positions in the centre. All armies are being cautious, allowing their allies to provide mutual support. The Araby wizard steps forward and uses his powers to summon a mirage. This unit will stay on the board, upsetting enemy command until it is removed by enemy contact. The Lich Priest adds his own mystic powers to the battle, casting doom and despair on the Grail Knights, which will prevent them from charging next turn. The magic carpets shoot at the Pegasus Knights but fail to cause any significant damage. The Pegasus Knights decide to home back towards the Dwarf General. The Dwarf Infantry continues to advance into the centre of the board, but the Dwarf General fails to order the Pegasus Knights and they must remain in place. Meanwhile, the Bretonnian cavalry holds position on their hill, while the remaining Bretonnian troops form line with the Dwarfs on the right flank. A brigade of undead infantry is ordered forward to take the swamp. Another undead infantry brigade take up firing positions within the wood, with the undead chariots and cavalry advancing between them. On the left, the Araby Knights perform a flanking manoeuvre but fail to receive the order to make them charge. Both armies appear unwilling to commit to no man's land at present. But the mistake by the Araby cavalry leaves them open to a countercharge. The Dwarf Slayers have to use their initiative to charge, so attack the Mirage Riders, who disappear. The Bretonnian general successfully orders his knights to charge the Araby Knights, whilst the squires are successfully ordered to charge their flank. The Bretonnian infantry crests the hill, bringing the Arabs into bow range, while the Pegasus Knights again fail to heed the orders of the Dwarf General and merely turn around on the spot. In shooting, the Bretonnian archers manage to slay a stand of Arab archers in defended terrain. The spearmen behind them refuse to make way, so the Arab archers are automatically confused. In combat, the Bretonnian cavalry inflict heavy losses on their Arab counterparts. The Bretonnian knights then fall back, allowing the squires to continue the pursuit alone. In the Undead turn, the carrion begin by homing back towards the Tomb King. The Lich Priest then orders the carrion to fly directly behind the Knight Brigade on the hill. The Lich Priest then orders the cavalry and chariots to charge the knights, hoping to drive them back into the carrion. As the Lich Priest joins this combat, the Tomb King moves closer to use his power in the combat phase. Meanwhile, the Araby general decides to keep his troops in defended positions. The Araby wizard moves forward but cannot summon the power to create a sandstorm, while the Lich Priest tries to raise some dead but fails. The Undead know that if they can destroy 3 units of knights this turn, they will break the Bretonnians and force them to withdraw. In the shooting phase, combined archery from Arabs and Undead remove a stand of Troll Slayers. In combat, the Undead plan succeeds and 2 units of knights are destroyed. A 3rd unit is pursued and, with the help of the zombie dragon, pulled down. As the victorious Undead reposition their forces on the hill, the remaining Bretonnian force withdraws from the battle, leaving 1 stand of Arab cavalry lucky to be alive. The Dwarfs must now continue this battle on their own, but they are surrounded on 3 sides by the enemy. The Troll Slayers begin by charging the skeleton archers on initiative and dragging some warriors with them. The remaining dwarf forces close the distance towards the Araby army, but fail to charge. In combat, the dwarfs destroy 2 stands of skeleton archers, but lose another stand of slayers in return. The dwarfs are forced to fall back whilst the Undead hold their defended position. Sensing victory, the Araby elephants and camel riders charge headlong into the waiting dwarf slayers and warriors. The magic carpets home back towards the Lich Priest awaiting orders, and they are sent forwards to further harass the unengaged slayers. The Lich Priest then fails to order the carrion, who have to remain on the hill. So the Tomb King steps forward and orders the diminished chariot brigade to charge the flank of the dwarfs. He then orders the remaining Undead cavalry to charge the rear of the engaged dwarf warriors. And this forces the dwarf general to retreat to a nearby friendly unit. The Lich Priest on Zombie Dragon then lends his weight to the engaged dwarf combat. The situation looks very bad for the dwarfs, but can they survive? In shooting, the single stand of unengaged slayers is wiped out. But in combat, the tenacious dwarf warriors withstand the chariot charge and drive them back. The dwarfs then fall back to threaten the chariot's flank next turn. The beleaguered slayers and dwarf warriors are trapped in a pincer movement and wiped out in combat, although the slayers manage to fell one of the mighty elephants. The camel riders decide to fall out of the combat, with the elephants and Undead cavalry maintaining pursuit, but they cannot kill the dwarfs. The dwarfs launch a desperate counterattack with warriors ploughing into the flank of the engaged Undead cavalry. The dwarf general adds his might to the fray, hoping to bring down the Undead dragon. Vengeful dwarf warriors also charge the flank of the chariots and destroy both units for the loss of a single stand. The dwarfen countercharge successfully saves their beleaguered brethren from being crushed underfoot. The Undead cavalry and dragon rider are destroyed. The Undead know that if they can kill one more stand of dwarf warriors, they will break them. Calling an all-out charge, the Allies pincer a beleaguered dwarf unit on 3 sides. Both generals join the fray and their combined might smashes the Dwarfs. So the Dwarfs are also forced to withdraw from the battlefield, leaving the Arabs and Undead firmly in control. We now calculate victory points to determine the margin of victory. Only units destroyed by enemy action can be counted. The Arabs lost 1.5 units of knights and half a unit of elephants, so their enemies get 265 points. The Undead have lost half a unit of archers, 2 units of chariots, 1 unit of cavalry, and the priest on zombie dragon, so their enemies score 500 points. This means between them the Dwarfs and Bretonnians score 765 points. Because the Bretonnians broke after only losing 3 units, their enemies only score for 2 units of knights, 1 unit of Grail knights and 1 damsel. They give up 385 points. Meanwhile, the Dwarfs lost 2.5 units of warriors, scoring 275 points, and 2 units of slayers, but due to slayers' special rule, they give up no victory points when wiped out. This means the Arabs and Undead only score 660 victory points. However, the rules clearly state that if you are broken, you cannot score more victory points than your opponent. So both sides only score 660 victory points and the game is a draw. Motherfucker!